He abandoned a pregnant woman and her unborn child. 15 years later, he froze in place when he realized her daughter was the star everyone was talking about. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The rain pattered against the windows of Marcus Fletcher's downtown apartment as Amara Johnson sat across from him, her hands trembling slightly as they rested on her rounded belly. The tension in the room was suffocating, pressing down on them like a physical weight. Marcus paced back and forth, his expensive watch catching the light with each agitated movement. At 27, he was on the fast track at his investment firm, youngest junior partner in the company's history, with promises of much more to come. "Are you absolutely sure?" he asked for the third time, his voice strained. Amara nodded, her long braids shifting with the movement. At 24, she had just completed her master's degree in education and had accepted a teaching position at a struggling public school. Her dream job, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. "I'm 8 weeks along," she said quietly. "I took 3 tests." Marcus stopped pacing and stared out the window at the city lights blurred by raindrops. Their relationship had been intense but brief, 4 months of passion that had seemed to promise something more, until now. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "We were careful." "Nothing is 100% effective," Amara replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "But I'm not here to argue about how it happened. It happened. I just thought you should know." Marcus turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "What do you want from me, Amara?" She straightened her back, dignity in every inch of her posture. "I'm keeping the baby, Marcus. That's already decided. I'm not here to trap you or demand anything. I just thought you deserved to know, and I wanted to understand what role, if any, you want to have." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus ran his hand over his closely cropped hair, his mind racing through calculations and consequences. His parents, traditional and conservative, would expect him to do the right thing. His firm valued a certain image, family-oriented, responsible, conventional. A child out of wedlock with a woman he barely knew didn't fit that picture. But there was more, much more, that he couldn't articulate even to himself. Fear, uncertainty, the weight of responsibility he wasn't ready to bear. "Amara," he finally said, his voice taking on the same smooth, controlled tone he used to close deals at work. "You have to understand my position. I'm at a critical point in my career. The next few years will determine everything for me." Amara's eyes narrowed slightly. "And I'm at a critical point in my life too, Marcus. This isn't what I planned either." "Then why not consider all the options?" he suggested carefully. "You're just starting your career. A child would change everything for you." The implication hung in the air between them. Amara's hand moved protectively over her stomach. "I've considered all my options," she said firmly. "This is my decision." Marcus felt a flash of annoyance. "A decision that affects me too. Which is why I'm here, giving you a choice about your involvement, but I'm not here to be talked out of my decision." The rain intensified, drumming against the windows like an urgently delivered message neither of them could decipher. Marcus walked to the kitchen counter and poured himself a glass of whiskey, not offering one to Amara. "I can support you financially," he said after taking a long sip. "I'll set up a monthly payment, but I don't want to be involved beyond that." Amara's face remained impassive, but something died in her eyes. "I'm not asking for your money, Marcus. It's the practical thing to do," he countered. "Child support. It's standard." "There's nothing standard about this situation," she said, rising from the couch. "I came here hoping... I don't know what I was hoping for. Not this. What did you expect? That I'd suddenly want to play house? Get married? That's not who I am, Amara. That's not what I want." "I know exactly who you are now," she replied, her voice soft but cutting. "And no, I don't want to marry you either." Marcus felt a stab of irrational offense at this. "Look, I'm trying to be reasonable here. I'm offering financial support. That's more than many men would do." Amara gathered her purse and coat. "Keep your money, Marcus. I don't want my child to have anything from someone who sees them as a burden, as something to pay off." She walked to the door, then turned for one last look at him. "I hope your career gives you everything you're sacrificing for it." Something in her tone made Marcus feel defensive. "This isn't just about my career. I'm not ready to be a father. I don't want to be a father. Not now, maybe not ever. You can't force that on me because of one mistake." Amara flinched at the word mistake, but her expression quickly hardened. "I'm not forcing anything on you. I'm releasing you from all responsibility. Stay away from us. That shouldn't be hard for you." "Amara, be reasonable." "I am being perfectly reasonable," she interrupted. "You've made your position clear. Now I'm making mine clear. This baby and I are a package deal. You don't want the responsibility of a child? Fine. You don't get one. No obligations, no rights, no relationship. That's what you want, right?" Marcus felt cornered, her words hitting harder than he expected. "You're being emotional. And you're being a coward," she replied, opening the door. "Goodbye, Marcus." The door closed behind her with a quiet click that somehow sounded more final than if she had slammed it. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, then downed the rest of his whiskey in one burning gulp. He told himself he'd done the right thing, the sensible thing. He wasn't ready for fatherhood, might never be ready. His own father had been distant and demanding, viewing his children primarily as extensions of his legacy rather than as individuals. Marcus had always feared he'd inherit that same emotional remoteness. Besides, he and Amara barely knew each other. 4 months of dating, mostly late dinners after work and weekend outings, wasn't enough time to build the foundation for co-parenting. They'd enjoyed each other's company, sure, but they came from different worlds. His family had wealth and connections. Hers had worked paycheck to paycheck. He valued ambition and success above all else. She talked passionately about making a difference in children's lives. Marcus poured another drink and tried to silence the small voice inside that whispered he was making a terrible mistake. By morning, he had convinced himself that Amara would come around to a more practical arrangement. She was just upset now, emotional because of the pregnancy. She'd realized that his financial support was the most logical solution. But days passed, then weeks, with no word from Amara. His calls went straight to voicemail, and eventually, her number was disconnected. He considered going to her apartment, but decided against it. She'd made her position clear, and part of him was relieved by her disappearance. It allowed him to return to his life, to focus on the path he'd chosen without the complication she represented. By the time 3 months had passed, Marcus had almost convinced himself that the entire episode had been resolved. Perhaps Amara had reconsidered her options. Perhaps the pregnancy hadn't continued. He deliberately avoided thinking about other possibilities, pushing away the occasional image of Amara's face, the hurt in her eyes when he'd called their child a mistake. His career flourished as he poured all his energy into work, staying later than anyone else, taking on the clients no one else wanted to handle, making himself indispensable to the firm. If sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep claimed him, he found himself wondering about Amara and the child that might have been, he quickly buried those thoughts under plans and projections for the next day's meetings. Life moved forward. The choice had been made, and Marcus Fletcher did not look back. The first month after leaving Marcus's apartment was the hardest for Amara. Morning sickness hit her with merciless intensity, leaving her exhausted and drained. Worse than the physical symptoms was the hollow ache in her chest, not for Marcus himself, but for the future she had briefly allowed herself to imagine. A supportive partner, a complete family for her child, shared joy and responsibility. Sitting on the bathroom floor of her small apartment after another bout of nausea, Amara wiped her mouth and leaned against the cool wall. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered. her hand on her still flat stomach. "But we're going to be okay." She hadn't told anyone about the pregnancy yet, not even her mother. Yvonne Johnson had raised Amara and her two brothers alone after their father walked out when Amara was just 7. She had worked 2 jobs to keep them fed, clothed, and in decent schools, sacrificing her own dreams to give her children opportunities. Amara dreaded disappointing her mother, who had been so proud when Amara became the first in their family to earn not just a bachelor's degree but a master's as well. When she finally gathered the courage to visit her mother's small house in the suburbs, Yvonne took one look at her daughter's face and knew something was wrong. "What is it, baby?" she asked, ushering Amara into the kitchen where a pot of her famous gumbo was simmering. The familiar smell brought tears to Amara's eyes. "Mama, I'm pregnant," she blurted out, unable to find a gentler way to break the news. Yvonne's wooden spoon clattered against the side of the pot. She stared at Amara for a long moment before asking, "That investment banker boy?" Amara nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "He doesn't want to be involved. Says he's not ready, that it would complicate his career." Yvonne's expression hardened. Men and their careers. Always an excuse. She turned down the heat under the gumbo and came to sit beside her daughter, taking Amara's trembling hands in her own work-roughened ones. "And what do you want, Amara?" "I want this baby," Amara answered without hesitation. "I know the timing isn't ideal, and I know it's going to be hard, but—" She placed a hand on her abdomen. "This is my child, Mama. I already love them." Yvonne's eyes softened. "Then that's all that matters." She squeezed her daughter's hands. "And you're not alone. You hear me? You will never be alone in this." The relief of her mother's acceptance broke something open inside Amara, and she sobbed against Yvonne's shoulder like she hadn't since she was a little girl. Her mother held her, rocking gently and murmuring reassurances until the storm of emotions passed. Over bowls of gumbo, they began to make plans. Amara would keep her new teaching job. She needed the income and the health insurance. Yvonne insisted that Amara move back home until the baby was born to save money and have support during the pregnancy. "What about child support?" Yvonne asked carefully. "You have rights, baby." Amara shook her head firmly. "He offered money, but I don't want anything from him. Not after the way he talked about this baby like it was a problem to solve, an inconvenience to his precious career." Her voice caught. "I don't want my child to ever feel like they're unwanted or a burden." Yvonne sighed. "Pride won't pay for diapers, Amara. It's not pride, Mama. It's protection. Marcus made it clear he doesn't want to be a father. I'm not going to force him into our lives through legal obligations. My child deserves better than a reluctant, resentful father." Yvonne looked like she wanted to argue further, but instead nodded slowly. "You always were stubborn, just like me." She reached out to touch Amara's cheek gently. "All right then. We do this our way. But if you ever change your mind—" "I won't," Amara said with quiet determination. "We're going to be fine." The weeks passed, and Amara's pregnancy progressed. She started her new job at Westside Elementary, a school in one of the city's most underserved neighborhoods. The principal, Mrs. Torres, was understanding when Amara shared her situation, assuring her that her job would be secure during and after her maternity leave. "We need dedicated teachers like you," Mrs. Torres said warmly. "And this school has always been more like family than just colleagues. We'll support you however we can." That support became crucial as Amara's pregnancy advanced. Her fellow teachers organized a baby shower, gifting her with essentials she would have struggled to afford on her own. When severe back pain made standing at the whiteboard for hours difficult, the school custodian fashioned a special cushioned stool for her classroom. The school nurse checked her blood pressure daily during the last trimester. At home, Yvonne converted her sewing room into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and setting up the crib that had once held Amara and her brothers. Amara's older brother James, now a contractor, fixed up the house on weekends, ensuring everything was safe and functional for the baby's arrival. Her younger brother Dion, still in college, sent his textbook money home with a note saying, "My niece or nephew needs it more than I do." "See?" Yvonne said one evening as they folded tiny onesies together. "You're not doing this alone." Amara nodded, grateful beyond words for her family's support. But sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet, she would feel a crushing wave of anxiety. Could she really do this? Be both mother and father to her child? Provide not just the necessities but the opportunities, the guidance, the love that every child deserved? In those moments of doubt, she would place her hands on her growing belly, feeling the reassuring movements of the life within. "We're going to prove him wrong," she would whisper fiercely. "We're going to be more than fine. We're going to be extraordinary." The birth came 2 weeks early, on a stormy April night that mirrored the night she had told Marcus about the pregnancy. After 14 hours of labor, Amara held her daughter for the first time. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfection with a head full of dark curls and eyes that, when they briefly opened, seemed to hold all the wisdom of the universe. "Zora," Amara whispered, her heart expanding with a love so powerful it took her breath away. Zora Yvonne Johnson, named for Zora Neale Hurston, whose books had sustained Amara through difficult times, and for the grandmother who stood beaming at the bedside, tears streaming down her face. "She's beautiful, baby," Yvonne said, gently touching the newborn's tiny fingers. "Perfect in every way." As Amara gazed at her daughter, the lingering pain and resentment toward Marcus began to fade. How could she regret anything that had led to this miracle in her arms? Perhaps someday she would even find gratitude for the path that had brought her here, alone but surrounded by love, beginning this new chapter with her daughter. The first year was a blur of exhaustion, joy, worry, and wonder. Amara took her full maternity leave and then returned to teaching, leaving Zora with Yvonne during school hours. The separation was harder than she had anticipated. Each morning she would kiss Zora's chubby cheeks a dozen times before finally tearing herself away, often arriving at school with tears still drying on her face. But she found unexpected fulfillment in her dual roles. In her classroom, she channeled her maternal instincts into creating a nurturing environment for her students, many of whom came from difficult home situations. And at home, she applied her teacher's patience and creativity to parenting, reading to Zora for hours, singing educational songs, creating sensory activities that delighted her curious daughter. As Zora grew from infant to toddler, Amara began to save diligently. Living with her mother had allowed her to build a modest nest egg, and by the time Zora was approaching her second birthday, Amara had enough for a down payment on a small house not far from her mother's, in a neighborhood with decent schools and safe parks. "Your own place," Yvonne said proudly when Amara signed the closing papers. "You did this yourself." "Not entirely myself," Amara corrected, hugging her mother. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." The little house became a haven, the place where Zora took her first steps across the living room floor, where she spoke her first full sentence, "Mama, book please," where Amara would collapse exhausted each night, only to wake before dawn to prepare for another day of teaching, parenting, and building the life she wanted for her daughter. There were moments, especially on milestone days like Zora's first day of preschool, when Amara would feel a pang of sadness that Marcus wasn't there to witness their daughter's growth. Not for her own sake, she had long since moved past romantic feelings for him, but for Zora's. Every child deserved to be cherished by both parents. But these moments of melancholy were fleeting, quickly replaced by pride in what she and Zora were building together. Their little family of 2 was thriving against the odds. And as challenging as single motherhood was, Amara wouldn't have traded it for anything in the world. By the time Zora turned 5, Amara had settled into a rhythm that, while demanding, brought her immense fulfillment. Her daughter was thriving, precocious, compassionate, and curious about everything. Zora had inherited Amara's love of books and would sit for hours flipping through picture books, making up stories to match the illustrations before she could even read the words. "Mama, when I grow up, I want to write books that tell stories nobody's ever heard before," Zora announced one evening as Amara braided her hair for bedtime. "I believe you will, sweetheart," Amara replied, her heart swelling with pride. "You have so many wonderful stories inside you." At school, Amara's dedication was beginning to bear fruit. Her innovative teaching methods had attracted attention, and she had been asked to lead professional development sessions for other teachers in the district. The additional income was welcome, allowing her to start a college fund for Zora and occasionally splurge on small luxuries like dance classes for her daughter and a reliable used car for herself. It was during one of these professional development sessions that Amara met Dr. Eleanor Winters, the superintendent of a nearby charter school network known for its progressive approach to education. "Your passion is evident," Dr. Winters told her after observing Amara's presentation on culturally responsive teaching strategies. "We need educators like you at Horizons Academy. Would you consider applying for our curriculum development director position? It's opening up next month." Amara was stunned. The position would mean a significant salary increase, more regular hours, and the chance to impact educational policy beyond a single classroom. But it would also mean leaving the school where she had built relationships and community. "I'm not sure I'm qualified," she admitted. "I've only been teaching for 6 years." "Sometimes fresh perspectives are exactly what's needed," Dr. Winters countered. "Just think about it." That night, after Zora was asleep, Amara called her mother to discuss the opportunity. "It sounds perfect for you," Yvonne said without hesitation. "You've always had bigger dreams than one classroom could hold." "But it's a risk," Amara worried. "What if I'm not ready? What if it doesn't work out?" "Then you'll find something else," her mother said simply. "You always do. That's who you are, Amara. You find a way forward no matter what." Bolstered by her mother's confidence, Amara applied for the position. The interview process was rigorous, culminating in a presentation to the school board where she outlined her vision for a curriculum that integrated academic excellence with social-emotional learning and cultural awareness. When the offer came, it exceeded her expectations, not only in compensation but in the scope of the role and the resources she would have at her disposal. With a mixture of excitement and trepidation, Amara accepted. The transition wasn't without challenges. The learning curve was steep, and the politics of educational administration were more complex than she had anticipated. There were nights when she questioned her decision, exhausted from juggling her new responsibilities with single motherhood. But Zora, now in kindergarten and flourishing, became her touchstone. Whenever Amara felt overwhelmed, she would look at her daughter, this remarkable little person who approached life with such enthusiasm and resilience, and find renewed purpose. "You're doing a great job, Mama," Zora would tell her, with all the certainty of a child who believed her mother hung the moon and stars. "You're helping all the kids learn good stuff." By the time Zora was 7, Amara had found her footing in her new role. Under her guidance, Horizons Academy implemented innovative programs that gained recognition beyond their district. A literacy initiative she developed was featured in a national education journal, bringing attention and additional funding to the school. Dr. Winters, now a mentor and friend, encouraged Amara to pursue a doctorate in educational leadership. "You have the potential to transform not just classrooms, but entire educational systems," she told Amara over coffee one afternoon. "Don't limit yourself." With Dr. Winters' support, Amara arranged a schedule that allowed her to work, parent, and study. The juggling act became even more complex, but Amara discovered reserves of energy and determination she hadn't known she possessed. Zora, now old enough to understand the significance of her mother's pursuits, became Amara's biggest cheerleader. "We're both students now," she would say proudly, setting up her homework beside Amara's textbooks at the kitchen table. "Study buddies forever." Through it all, Amara never sought any contact with Marcus. She had meant what she said that rainy night in his apartment. She wanted nothing from him, not his money, not his presence, not even his acknowledgement. In her mind, he had forfeited any right to be part of their lives when he had rejected them so completely. When Zora began to ask questions about her father around age 8, spurred by Father's Day activities at school and friends who had 2 parents, Amara was honest but measured in her responses. "Your father wasn't ready to be a parent when you were born," she explained, holding Zora close on the porch swing of their small house. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices based on what they think is best for themselves at the time." "Did he ever want to meet me?" Zora asked, her brown eyes serious. Amara chose her words carefully. "He chose not to be part of our family. But that doesn't mean there was anything wrong with you, sweetheart. The problem was his, not yours. And we've built a beautiful family, haven't we? You and me and Grandma and your uncles?" Zora nodded, seemingly satisfied for the moment. But Amara knew the questions would return as her daughter grew older and her understanding of family dynamics deepened. By the time Zora turned 10, Amara had completed her doctorate and been promoted to Executive Director of Curriculum for the entire charter network, overseeing educational programming for 7 schools. The position came with another significant salary increase, allowing them to move from their small starter home to a spacious townhouse in a neighborhood known for its excellent public schools and diverse community. The move marked a turning point. For the first time, Amara felt truly secure, financially, professionally, emotionally. The days of stretching every dollar, of lying awake worrying about unexpected expenses, were behind them. She could provide Zora with not just necessities but opportunities. Summer camps focused on creative writing, piano lessons, travel to see historical sites and natural wonders. "You've come so far," Yvonne remarked during a Sunday dinner at Amara's new home. "Both of you." Amara looked around the table, at her mother, whose sacrifices had made her own achievements possible, at her brothers, who had stepped up as male role models in Zora's life, and at Zora herself, now a poised and thoughtful preteen with a passion for storytelling and social justice. "We all have," Amara replied, raising her glass in a toast. "Together." As Zora approached her teenage years, her resemblance to Amara grew stronger, but there were moments when Amara would catch glimpses of Marcus in her daughter, in the determined set of her jaw when she was concentrating, in her analytical approach to problems, in the charismatic way she could persuade others to her point of view. These moments no longer brought pain, just a fleeting recognition that Zora was her own person, a unique blend of inherited traits expressed in ways neither of her parents could have predicted. And what a person she was becoming. Compassionate yet strong-willed, academically gifted but never boastful, with a natural leadership quality that drew people to her. By 14, Zora had founded a literacy program that paired middle school students with elementary school children for reading sessions. The program started small, just at her school, but quickly expanded to other schools in the district. When a local news station did a feature on the initiative, Zora spoke with such eloquence about the importance of mentorship and literacy that the clip went viral. "Dr. Johnson's daughter is clearly following in her mother's footsteps," the news anchor commented, referencing Amara's now well-established reputation in educational circles. Watching the broadcast, Amara felt a complex mixture of emotions, immense pride in her daughter's accomplishments, gratitude for the journey that had brought them here, and, surprisingly, a moment of wondering what Marcus would think if he could see the remarkable young woman their daughter had become. Not that it mattered. They had built this life without him. Every achievement, every milestone, every moment of joy and growth had been earned through their own efforts and the support of those who had chosen to stand by them. As Zora's 15th birthday approached, Amara planned a special celebration, a weekend trip to New York City to see Broadway shows and visit the publishing houses that represented Zora's favorite authors. The timing aligned perfectly with an educational conference where Amara had been invited to be a keynote speaker, discussing the innovative literacy programs she had implemented across their charter network. "It's going to be amazing, Mom," Zora exclaimed as they finalized the itinerary. "The perfect birthday," Amara smiled, watching her daughter's excitement. 15 years since that rainy night when she had walked away from Marcus's apartment, heart heavy with rejection but resolve strengthening with each step. 15 years of challenges and triumphs, tears and laughter, growth and transformation. "Yes," she agreed, pulling Zora into a hug. "Perfect." Neither of them could have anticipated that this trip would bring the past rushing back into their lives, setting in motion events that would challenge everything they had built and believed about their family. The corner office on the 42nd floor offered a panoramic view of the city, the same city where Marcus Fletcher had once shared an apartment with dreams that seemed smaller now, despite everything he had achieved. At 42, he was exactly where he had planned to be 15 years ago, senior partner at Braxton & White Investment Group, with a client list that included celebrities, tech moguls, and old money families who trusted him with their considerable fortunes. On paper, Marcus Fletcher was a success story. The financial magazines said so. His bank account confirmed it. The speaking invitations and board appointments validated it. So why did he feel so hollow? Marcus loosened his silk tie and swiveled his chair away from the floor-to-ceiling windows. On his desk, amid the carefully arranged portfolio reports and leather-bound notebooks, sat a silver frame. The photograph showed Marcus flanked by his parents at last year's charity gala, his father, Raymond Fletcher, still imposing at 72, and his mother, Catherine, elegant and reserved as always. They were all smiling, but the smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. His phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was his executive assistant, reminding him of the dinner he had scheduled with Vanessa, his girlfriend of the past 6 months. Relationship number. What was it now? He had lost count of the women who had moved through his life, none staying long enough to disturb the carefully constructed order of his existence. Vanessa would probably be gone by summer. Like the others, she would eventually grow tired of canceled dates due to work emergencies, of his emotional unavailability, of the way he kept his apartment and his heart meticulously arranged to accommodate only himself. "I'll be ready to leave at 7, he told his assistant, glancing at the expensive watch on his wrist, a gift to himself when he made partner 5 years ago. The day proceeded as most days did for Marcus. Meetings with clients, conference calls with overseas investors, strategy sessions with his team. He was good at his job, exceptional in fact. His analytical mind could spot opportunities others missed, and his charisma could convince even the most cautious investors to take calculated risks that often paid off handsomely. But somewhere along the way, the thrill had faded. The rush of closing a major deal, of seeing his strategies yield impressive returns, had diminished to a brief moment of satisfaction before the emptiness returned. At precisely 7 o'clock, Marcus left his office. His driver was waiting at the curb in the sleek black car that was another symbol of his success. As they navigated through evening traffic toward the upscale restaurant where Vanessa would be waiting, Marcus found his thoughts drifting, as they increasingly did in quiet moments, to paths not taken and choices made long ago. 15 years was a significant portion of a lifetime. 15 years of single-minded focus on career advancement. 15 years of collecting achievements like trophies. 15 years of superficial relationships that provided companionship without true intimacy. 15 years since he had last seen Amara Johnson. The memory of her still had the power to discomfort him. The hurt in her eyes that night. The quiet dignity with which she had walked away despite his rejection. For years he had suppressed thoughts of her and the child she had been carrying. His child. Whenever the thought surfaced, he would remind himself of the rational decision he had made. He hadn't been ready for fatherhood. His career had demanded his full attention. It had been the practical choice. But lately, These justifications rang hollow. At 42, with all the trappings of success surrounding him, Marcus found himself plagued by the question, what if? What if he had made a different choice that night? What if he had found the courage to step into the unknown, to embrace the responsibility of fatherhood alongside Amara? What kind of father might he have become? What kind of man? The car stopped in front of the restaurant, its facade glowing warmly in the evening light. Through the window, Marcus could see Vanessa already seated at their regular table, elegant in a fitted black dress, checking her phone with a slightly impatient expression. "We've arrived, Mr. Fletcher," his driver announced unnecessarily. "Thank you, James," Marcus replied, gathering himself. "I'll call when I'm ready to leave." Dinner with Vanessa followed its usual script: discussion of their respective workdays, gossip about mutual acquaintances, plans for an upcoming charity event where they would make an appearance as a couple. Vanessa was beautiful, intelligent, and ambitious, a corporate attorney whose schedule was as demanding as his own. On paper, they were perfectly matched. "You're distracted tonight," she observed as their entrees arrived. "Another big deal in the works?" Marcus offered a practiced smile. "Just the usual market fluctuations. Nothing to worry about." She accepted his vague explanation, moving the conversation to her own work challenges. Marcus listened, or at least appeared to, while his mind continued its traitor's path back to the past. He had looked for Amara once, about 6 months after their final encounter. Pride and uncertainty had kept him away initially, but eventually, curiosity and a vague sense of responsibility had driven him to her apartment building. The landlord informed him that she had moved out months earlier, leaving no forwarding address. He could have hired a private investigator to find her. It would have been easy with his resources, but he had taken her absence as a sign, a confirmation that she had meant what she said about wanting nothing from him. Perhaps she had terminated the pregnancy after all. Perhaps she had moved on with someone else who had embraced the role he had rejected. Either way, he had let it go, focusing on the path he had chosen. As the years passed, that decision, like many in his life, had calcified into an immutable fact. He didn't think about Amara often. He didn't allow himself to wonder about the child who would now be a teenager. If the pregnancy had continued, if the child had been born healthy, if... "Marcus," Vanessa's voice cut through his reverie. "Did you hear anything I just said?" "I'm sorry," he apologized, forcing himself back to the present. "It's been a long day." Vanessa's perfectly manicured nails tapped against her wine glass. "I was saying that my firm is handling a major educational conference next month. The keynote speaker is some hotshot educational consultant who's revolutionizing literacy programs in urban schools." She shrugged. "Not usually our type of client, but the conference is sponsored by the Warrington Foundation, so..." Marcus nodded, only half listening as Vanessa continued to detail her firm's involvement with the conference. His thoughts had already drifted again, this time to a more immediate concern: the growing realization that he was profoundly dissatisfied with his life. It wasn't a midlife crisis exactly. He wasn't tempted to buy a sports car or start dating women half his age. His discontent was deeper, more existential. He had achieved everything he had set out to accomplish professionally, but the success felt meaningless. He had amassed wealth, but had no one with whom to share it in any meaningful way. His parents were proud of his achievements, but remained as emotionally distant as they had been throughout his childhood. And despite the string of relationships, none had progressed to the point where he could envision a shared future, a family, a legacy beyond spreadsheets and investment portfolios. "You're impossible tonight," Vanessa said, setting down her fork with a soft clink. "What's really going on with you?" Marcus considered deflecting again, but found himself too weary for the pretense. "I've been thinking about choices, about paths not taken." Vanessa raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "That sounds ominously philosophical. Should I be concerned?" "No," he said quickly, not wanting to navigate the emotional complications of reassuring her. "Just the usual reflections that come with middle age, I suppose." "You're hardly in your dotage, Marcus," she replied with a small laugh. "But if you're having some sort of existential moment, perhaps you should talk to someone professional. I can recommend my therapist." Marcus forced a smile. "I'll consider it." They finished dinner with polite conversation, but a new tension lingered between them. When they parted ways outside the restaurant, Vanessa to her own waiting car, her kiss on his cheek was perfunctory. "Call me when you're feeling more present," she said, a hint of genuine concern beneath her practiced poise. Marcus nodded, already knowing that he probably wouldn't call, that this relationship, like the others, had reached its natural conclusion. He watched her car pull away, then instructed his driver to take him home. In his penthouse apartment, spacious, immaculately designed, and utterly impersonal, Marcus poured himself a scotch and walked to the wall of windows that offered another stunning view of the city. Lights twinkled in the darkness, each one representing lives being lived, families sharing meals, children being tucked into bed, relationships deepening through shared moments of joy and challenge. Somewhere out there, did a 15-year-old exist who shared his DNA? A teenager with his analytical mind or his mother's artistic talent? Did this child, his child, ever wonder about him? The father who had chosen career ambition over family? The thought, once allowed to surface fully, would not be suppressed again. It expanded in his consciousness, demanding attention, insisting on reckoning. Marcus took a long sip of scotch, feeling the familiar burn in his throat. He had spent 15 years running from this moment of truth, burying it under achievements and acquisitions. But standing alone in his pristine apartment, surrounded by the evidence of his success, Marcus Fletcher finally admitted to himself that he had made a devastating mistake. The realization came not as a sudden epiphany, but as the quiet culmination of years of unacknowledged regret. He had chosen wrong. And now, at 42, he was living with the consequences. Wealth without purpose, achievement without meaning, relationships without depth. Marcus set down his glass and reached for his phone. It was time to find Amara Johnson and the child he had rejected. Not to disrupt their lives or to claim rights he had forfeited, but to acknowledge the truth and perhaps, if they were willing, to offer something more than the financial support he had once believed was sufficient. It was time to face the greatest failure of his meticulously planned life. New York City embraced Amara and Zora with its characteristic energy, vibrant, chaotic, exhilarating. Their hotel, a boutique establishment in Midtown, offered the perfect base for their weekend adventures. Zora had spent the morning of her 15th birthday bouncing between the window and her suitcase, too excited to settle on which outfit to wear first. "Mom, can we go to the Strand bookstore today, before your conference stuff starts?" Zora asked, her long braids swinging as she turned from the window. She had styled her hair herself for the trip, incorporating blue beads that caught the light when she moved. Amara smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. "Absolutely. The welcome reception isn't until 6, so we have the whole day to ourselves." "Best birthday ever," Zora declared, finally selecting an outfit, a stylish but comfortable ensemble that reflected her developing sense of style, creative yet practical, just like her personality. They spent the morning exploring the famous bookstore, where Zora filled a basket with novels, poetry collections, and writing guides. Amara watched her daughter navigate the towering shelves with confidence, occasionally bringing books for Amara's opinion but mostly trusting her own literary instincts. "You've raised quite the impressive young woman," commented a bookstore employee who had been helping Zora find specific titles. "Most teenagers her age are glued to their phones, not discussing comparative literature." "She's always been her own person," Amara replied with pride. "Books have been her passion since before she could read them." After the bookstore, they enjoyed lunch at a small cafe, followed by a leisurely walk through Central Park. The spring day was perfect. Warm sunshine tempered by a gentle breeze, the park's trees displaying their fresh green foliage. "I could live here," Zora said, spinning around with her arms outstretched. "I'm going to college in New York, NYU or Columbia, and then I'll become a famous author and have an apartment overlooking the park." Amara laughed. "I have no doubt you'll achieve exactly that if it's what you want." "You don't think I'm being unrealistic?" Zora asked, suddenly serious. "Ms. Pearson said I should be more practical about my future plans." "Ms. Pearson means well," Amara said carefully, referring to Zora's guidance counselor. "But she doesn't know you like I do. You've never let obstacles stop you before. Why start now?" Zora's smile returned, brighter than before. "Thanks, Mom. You always know what to say." As the afternoon progressed, they made their way back to the hotel to prepare for the evening's conference reception. Amara changed into a tailored pantsuit that projected professional confidence, while Zora chose a sophisticated dress that made her look older than her 15 years. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Amara said, feeling a momentary pang at how quickly her daughter was growing up. "Are you sure you won't be bored at this reception? We could order you room service instead if you'd prefer." "And miss seeing my mom in action?" "No way," Zora insisted. "Besides, you said there might be publishers there. I want to learn how the industry works." Always thinking ahead, always planning. In this, Zora reminded Amara of herself, determined, focused, unwilling to let circumstances dictate her path. The reception was being held in a grand ballroom at a historic hotel near their own. As they entered, Amara was immediately greeted by colleagues and admirers of her work. Zora stayed close at first, observing the professional interactions with keen interest, before gradually gaining confidence to engage in conversations herself. Amara watched with pride as her daughter charmed a group of educators with her insights on student-led literacy initiatives. Zora's poise and articulation belied her youth, and more than one attendee assumed she was a college student rather than a high school freshman. "Dr. Johnson, what a pleasure to finally meet you in person," a woman approached, extending her hand. "I'm Elaine Warrington of the Warrington Foundation. Your keynote tomorrow is the highlight of our program." "The pleasure is mine," Amara replied warmly. "Your foundation's work in educational equity has been groundbreaking." "And who is this impressive young woman?" Elaine asked, turning to Zora. "This is my daughter, Zora. We're combining my conference with her birthday celebration this weekend." "How wonderful! Happy birthday, Zora. Are you following in your mother's educational footsteps?" "I'm more interested in writing and publishing," Zora answered confidently. "But I've learned so much from my mom about the importance of literacy and educational access." "Well, you must meet my husband, Daniel. He sits on the board of Meridian Publishing. Perhaps he can offer some industry insights." Elaine waved across the room to a distinguished man in conversation with several others. "Daniel, come meet Dr. Johnson and her daughter." As Daniel Warrington excused himself from his group and began making his way toward them, Amara's attention was momentarily drawn to a commotion near the entrance. A latecomer had arrived, someone important judging by the reaction of those near the door. Heads turned, whispers circulated. Amara returned her focus to the approaching Daniel Warrington, but Zora was still looking toward the entrance, her expression curious. "That man looks familiar," she murmured. "Where have I seen him before?" Before Amara could respond, Daniel reached them. "Elaine, always pulling me away from boring conversations to meet interesting people," he said good-naturedly, shaking Amara's hand. "Dr. Johnson, your work on inclusive literacy frameworks has been revolutionary. We're honored to have you at our conference." "Thank you for the opportunity to share our results," Amara replied. "And this is my daughter, Zora, who's celebrating her 15th birthday this weekend." "A birthday in New York! How exciting!" Daniel said, turning his attention to Zora. "And you're interested in publishing, I hear." As Zora engaged in conversation with the Warringtons about the publishing industry, Amara became aware of a shift in the room's energy. The important latecomer was moving through the crowd, stopping to greet various attendees, gradually making his way in their general direction. Something about the man's silhouette triggered a distant memory, but Amara dismissed it. In her position, she met countless people at conferences and educational events, likely someone she had encountered professionally at some point. Amara? Amara Johnson? The voice froze her in place. A voice unchanged by 15 years. A voice that had once whispered affection in her ear before speaking words of rejection that altered the course of her life. Slowly, she turned. Marcus Fletcher stood before her, as impeccably dressed as she remembered, though his face now showed subtle signs of age, distinguished lines around his eyes, a touch of gray at his temples. His expression was one of genuine shock, as if he had seen a ghost. "Marcus," she acknowledged, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. 15 years of building a life without him, and now here he was, standing in front of her at her daughter's birthday celebration. Their daughter, the daughter he had rejected before she was even born. "I didn't expect... I was told this was an educational conference," Marcus stammered, his usual poise abandoning him. "It is," Amara replied coolly. "I'm the keynote speaker tomorrow." His eyes widened slightly. "You're Dr. Amara Johnson, the educational consultant who developed the Urban Literacy Initiative?" Before she could respond, Zora turned from her conversation with the Warringtons, curious about the newcomer addressing her mother. And in that moment, time seemed to stop. Marcus stared at Zora, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning recognition. The girl before him was the perfect blend of himself and Amara, her mother's warm brown complexion and expressive eyes, but his jawline, his height, even something of his mannerisms in the way she held herself. "Mom?" Zora said, a question in her voice as she sensed the tension. "Zora," Amara said, fighting to keep her voice calm. "This is Marcus Fletcher, an old acquaintance." "Fletcher Investment Group," Zora said suddenly. "That's why you look familiar. Your firm sponsors the business leadership program at my school. You spoke at the launch event last fall." Marcus seemed unable to tear his gaze away from Zora. "Yes," he managed. "That's right." An awkward silence fell, broken by Elaine Warrington. "Marcus is one of our most generous donors," she explained, oblivious to the undercurrents. "His firm manages the Warrington Foundation's endowment." "Very successfully, I might add," Daniel chimed in. "Marcus has a gift for making money grow." Amara felt a hysterical laugh threatening to bubble up. Of all the conferences in all the cities, they had to end up at one funded by Marcus's client. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. "How do you two know each other?" Elaine asked, looking between Amara and Marcus with friendly curiosity. "We dated briefly," Amara said before Marcus could respond. "Many years ago." "Small world," Daniel exclaimed. "Well, we should continue making our rounds. Zora, it was delightful meeting you. Happy birthday again. I've made a note to have our educational publishing director reach out to you about internship opportunities." As the Warringtons moved away, Amara, Marcus, and Zora were left in an island of uncomfortable silence amid the bustling reception. 15, Marcus said quietly, his eyes still on Zora. "You're 15 today." Zora nodded, confusion evident on her face. "Yes." The implication of his words hung in the air. 15 years since that rainy night. 15 years since he had chosen career over fatherhood. 15 years of absence. "Zora, would you mind getting me a glass of water?" Amara asked, needing a moment alone with Marcus. Zora looked between them, clearly sensing that something significant was happening, but nodded. "Sure, Mom." As she walked away, Amara turned to Marcus, her composure maintained through sheer force of will. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" "I told you I didn't know you would be here. The Warringtons are clients. Elaine asked me to attend as a representative of their financial interests." He paused, his eyes following Zora across the room. "Is she... Yes, Amara said simply. She's your biological daughter, the one you wanted nothing to do with. Marcus flinched at her words. Amara, don't, she cut him off. Whatever you're about to say, save it. It's 15 years too late. Please, he said, his voice low and urgent. Can we talk? Privately? Amara glanced toward Zora, who was returning with a glass of water, her expression curious and concerned. This is neither the time nor the place. This is my daughter's birthday celebration and my professional event. I won't have either disrupted. Your daughter, Marcus repeated, a note of pain in his voice. Of course. Mom, is everything okay? Zora asked as she rejoined them, handing Amara the water. Everything's fine, sweetheart, Amara assured her, though her hand trembled slightly as she took the glass. Mr. Fletcher was just leaving. Marcus looked as if he wanted to protest, but after a moment's hesitation, he nodded. It was very nice to meet you, Zora, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Happy birthday. As he walked away, Zora turned to Amara with questions in her eyes. Mom, what was that about? You looked like you'd seen a ghost. Amara took a steadying breath. This was not how she had envisioned this weekend unfolding, not how she had imagined Zora might someday meet her father, if such a meeting ever occurred at all. It's complicated, Zora, she said finally, and not a conversation for right now. Let's enjoy the rest of the reception, and we can talk later. Zora studied her mother's face for a long moment before nodding slowly. Okay, but something's definitely going on, and I want to know what it is. I promise we'll talk, Amara said, squeezing her daughter's hand. Just not here. As they rejoined the reception, Amara was acutely aware of Marcus's presence across the room. He remained for another 30 minutes, keeping his distance but watching them, watching Zora, with an intensity that Amara could feel even when her back was turned. When he finally left, she felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief that the immediate tension had passed, but dread knowing that this unexpected encounter had opened a door that could never be fully closed again. The carefully constructed narrative of their family, just the two of them against the world, had been disrupted, and whatever happened next would depend not just on her choices or Marcus's, but on Zora's as well. As Amara watched her daughter laughing with a group of young professionals who had taken her under their wing, she felt a fierce protectiveness surge within her. 15 years of building a life without Marcus Fletcher. 15 years of ensuring that Zora never felt the absence of a father who had rejected her before birth. She would not allow him to waltz back into their lives now, disrupting the stability and happiness they had achieved, just because seeing Zora had triggered some belated paternal instinct or midlife crisis of conscience. Whatever Marcus wanted, whatever he thought he deserved, Amara was prepared to stand firm, for Zora's sake and for her own. Marcus sat in the back of his car, staring unseeing at the passing city lights. His driver had asked twice about their destination before Marcus finally instructed him to just drive around the block. He needed time to think, to process the seismic shift that had just occurred in his understanding of his own life. Zora, his daughter, 15 years old today and completely unaware of who he was. The resemblance had hit him like a physical blow the moment she turned around. Her eyes were Amara's, but that determined jawline, the analytical quirk of her eyebrow when she was assessing a situation, those were pure Fletcher traits. His mother's height, his father's confidence in how she carried herself, and something else entirely her own, a brightness, a presence that lit up the room around her. She was magnificent, and he had missed every moment of her becoming so. Marcus pressed his fingers against his closed eyelids, feeling an unfamiliar pressure building behind them. When was the last time he had been moved to tears? He couldn't remember. His phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "How's the boring finance reception?" He ignored it, instead pulling up the browser on his phone to search for Amara Johnson. The results were impressive. articles about her educational initiatives, interviews where she discussed literacy methodologies, photographs of her accepting awards. Dr. Amara Johnson, Executive Director of Curriculum for Horizons Charter Network, renowned educational consultant, keynote speaker at conferences nationwide. While he had been accumulating wealth and status, she had been building something meaningful, not just a career but a positive impact on countless young lives. And she had raised their daughter apparently with no support from him, financial or otherwise. The realization filled him with shame. He had offered money, the easiest thing for him to give, and she had refused it, choosing instead the harder path of true independence. Marcus instructed his driver to take him to his hotel, a different one from where the conference was being held. In his suite, he poured himself a drink but left it untouched on the side table as he paced the room. He needed to speak with Amara privately, to explain… What? That he regretted his decision? That seeing Zora had awakened something in him that he hadn't known was missing? Would any of that matter to the woman who had walked away from his apartment 15 years ago and built a successful life without him? After an hour of mental circles, Marcus made a decision. He would attend Amara's keynote address tomorrow, and afterward, he would find a way to speak with her alone. Not to insert himself into their lives, but at least to acknowledge his past mistake and perhaps, if she was willing, to learn more about the daughter he had never known. Morning found him in the conference hotel ballroom, seated near the back as Amara took the stage to enthusiastic applause. She looked commanding and confident in a deep blue suit, her braids styled elegantly away from her face. Her presentation was masterful, articulate, passionate, backed by compelling data about the impact of her literacy programs on student outcomes. Marcus found himself genuinely impressed by her expertise and the way she engaged the audience. This was not the same young woman who had sat nervously in his apartment 15 years ago. This was Dr. Amara Johnson, respected authority in her field, moving comfortably in professional circles that likely would have intimidated her younger self. From his vantage point, he could see Zora seated in the front row, watching her mother with unmistakable pride. Several times during the presentation, Amara would make a point that resonated particularly strongly, and Zora would nod as if they had discussed this concept many times before, a shared language between mother and daughter that went beyond words. When the presentation concluded with a standing ovation, Marcus remained in his seat, watching as audience members lined up to speak with Amara. He would wait until the crowd thinned before approaching her. As he waited, his phone buzzed again. Vanessa, with another text expressing mild annoyance that he had not responded to her earlier message. With a sigh, Marcus typed a brief response. "We need to talk when I return to the city. Things have changed." It was abrupt, perhaps unkind, but his mind was too full of Amara and Zora to construct something more tactful. Finally, as the ballroom began to empty, Marcus approached the stage where Amara was gathering her presentation materials. Zora had stepped away, engaged in conversation with Elaine Warrington near the entrance. "Your presentation was extraordinary," Marcus said quietly as he reached her. Amara looked up, her expression immediately guarded. "Thank you. I didn't expect to see you here." "I needed to talk to you," he admitted. "Properly, not in the middle of a reception." Amara glanced toward Zora, then back to Marcus. "I don't think we have anything to discuss, Marcus. What's done is done." "Please," he said, an unfamiliar note of vulnerability in his voice. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Amara studied him for a moment, then nodded curtly. 5 minutes. There's a small meeting room just off the lobby. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes after I make sure Zora is settled." "Thank you," Marcus said, relief washing over him. It was more than he had dared to hope for. The meeting room was austere, a simple table surrounded by chairs with bland corporate artwork on the walls. Marcus paced nervously, rehearsing what he wanted to say, knowing that none of it would probably come out as planned once Amara was actually in front of him. When she entered precisely 10 minutes later, her professional demeanor was firmly in place, as if she were preparing for a difficult negotiation rather than a conversation with the father of her child. 5 minutes, she reminded him, remaining standing near the door. Marcus nodded, suddenly finding his carefully prepared words inadequate. She's remarkable, he said finally. Yes, she is, Amara agreed, her expression softening slightly at the mention of her daughter. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. I can see why, Marcus said. Amara, I know nothing I say now can change the past 15 years, but I want you to know that I've regretted my decision. Not immediately. I was too selfish then to understand what I was throwing away. But over time, the emptiness of the path I chose became clearer. Amara's expression remained carefully neutral. Is that supposed to mean something to me now, Marcus? That you eventually realized you made a mistake? No, he admitted. I don't expect it to change anything for you. You've built an amazing life, a successful career. You've raised an incredible daughter without any help from me. I needed to say it, to acknowledge that I was wrong. Fine, you've acknowledged it. Amara crossed her arms. What do you want now, Marcus? Because if you think you can waltz back into our lives after 15 years of silence— I don't, he interrupted quickly. I have no right to be part of your lives. I forfeited that right when I chose my career over my child. I understand that. Then what is this about? Marcus took a deep breath. I'd like to know about her, not to interfere, not to claim any place in her life that I haven't earned, just to know who she is, what she likes, what makes her who she is. Amara's guard lowered slightly, confusion replacing some of the defensiveness in her expression. Why now? Because you happened to run into us? If we hadn't been at this conference, would you ever have sought us out? I'd like to say yes, Marcus replied honestly. But I don't know. Seeing her, seeing you both, was like waking up from a 15-year sleepwalk through my own life. But even before yesterday, I'd been questioning the choices I made, the priorities I set. Midlife crisis? Amara suggested, a hint of bitterness in her tone. Maybe, Marcus conceded. Or maybe just finally growing up enough to recognize what matters. Amara sighed, moving further into the room and leaning against the conference table. What exactly are you asking for, Marcus? Visitation rights? A relationship with Zora? Because I need to be very clear. That's not my decision to make. Zora is 15, old enough to have a say in who is part of her life. I understand that, Marcus said. I'm not asking for legal rights or scheduled visits. I'd like the opportunity to meet her properly, to explain who I am, to answer any questions she might have about me or my family history, medical information she should know, that sort of thing. And if she doesn't want that, if she decides she's not interested in knowing the man who rejected her before she was born? The words stung, but Marcus accepted them as his due. Then I'll respect her decision. I won't push. I promise you that. Amara studied him for a long moment, as if trying to gauge his sincerity. Zora has asked about you over the years, she admitted finally. I've never lied to her, but I've been selective in what I've shared. I've told her that her biological father wasn't ready to be a parent, that he chose a different path. I haven't painted you as a villain if that's what you're worried about. Relief flooded through Marcus. Thank you for that. I didn't do it for you, Amara clarified. I did it for her. I never wanted her to feel unwanted or unworthy because of your choices. Of course, Marcus said quickly. I just meant, thank you for protecting her from the full truth of my selfishness. Amara pushed away from the table, straightening her suit jacket. Your 5 minutes are up, Marcus. I need to get back to Zora. Will you think about it? About allowing me to meet with her properly? I'll talk to Zora, Amara said after a moment's hesitation. I'll explain who you are and ask if she wants to meet you, but I won't pressure her either way. This has to be entirely her choice. That's all I'm asking, Marcus said. Thank you, Amara. She nodded once, then turned to leave, pausing with her hand on the doorknob. For what it's worth, Marcus, it seems like you've grown up. Better late than never, I suppose. It wasn't forgiveness, not even close, but it was something. A small acknowledgement that perhaps he wasn't the same man who had made that devastating choice 15 years ago. After Amara left, Marcus remained in the meeting room, processing their conversation. He had no right to expect anything from either Amara or Zora. The fact that Amara was even willing to discuss the possibility of a meeting was more than he deserved. His phone buzzed again, another message from Vanessa, this one more concerned than annoyed. He ignored it. Whatever was happening between them seemed trivial compared to the possibility of meeting his daughter. His daughter. The concept was still stunning, still reshaping his understanding of himself and his place in the world. As he finally left the meeting room, Marcus caught sight of Amara and Zora in the hotel lobby, deep in conversation. From their expressions and body language, he could tell that Amara was explaining something significant, likely who he was and his sudden appearance in their lives. Zora's face cycled through emotions, shock, confusion, hurt, curiosity. She glanced up once, scanning the lobby, and Marcus quickly stepped behind a pillar, not wanting to intrude on this moment between mother and daughter. He had waited 15 years. He could wait a little longer to learn if Zora would grant him the chance he had never given her, the opportunity to be known. Back in his hotel room, Marcus found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, praying. Not to any specific deity or according to any formal religion, but a simple, desperate plea to whatever powers might be listening that he had not irreparably damaged his chance to know his daughter. Hours passed with no word from Amara. Marcus alternated between pacing his room and sitting motionless, staring at his silent phone. He ordered room service but left the food untouched. He drafted and deleted countless emails to his office, unable to focus on work matters that had seemed so crucial just days ago. As evening approached, he began to accept that perhaps Zora had decided she wanted nothing to do with him. It would be her right, more than her right. He had rejected her. Now she was rejecting him. Poetic justice at its finest. Then, just as the sky outside his window deepened to indigo, his phone chimed with an incoming text from an unknown number. "This is Amara. Zora would like to meet you tomorrow morning. 9 a.m., the cafe in our hotel lobby. Just you and her initially. She has questions. Be honest with her. That's all she wants from you right now." Marcus read the message 3 times, his heart racing. She had agreed to meet him. His daughter wanted to talk to him. With trembling fingers, he typed his reply, "I'll be there. Thank you." Then he set the phone down and did something else he hadn't done in years. He cried. Zora Johnson had always considered herself a fairly level-headed person. At school, she was known for her calm approach to challenges, her ability to think things through before reacting. Her mother often praised her emotional intelligence, her capacity to process complex feelings with maturity beyond her years. But nothing in her 15 years had prepared her for the revelation that her biological father, the man who had chosen career over family, who had existed in her mind primarily as an abstract concept rather than a flesh-and-blood person, was suddenly, unexpectedly present in her life. "Marcus Fletcher," she whispered to herself, testing the name as she stood before the hotel room mirror, carefully selecting an outfit for their meeting. "Investment banker. My father." The words felt foreign on her tongue, like she was speaking about a stranger, which of course she was. Her entire life, whenever she had thought about her father, it had been in vague terms, a faceless figure who wasn't ready to be a parent, as her mother had always explained. She had imagined him occasionally over the years, constructing a hazy image based on the few details her mother had shared and the features she saw in herself that didn't come from her mother's side. Now that hazy figure had a name, a face, a career, even a company that had sponsored programs at her school. The irony wasn't lost on her, all those times she had seen the Fletcher Investment Group logo, never knowing it belonged to the man whose DNA she carried. "Zora?" Her mother's voice came through the bathroom door. "Are you almost ready? We should head down soon if you want breakfast before your meeting." Almost, Zora called back, finally selecting a simple but elegant outfit. Dark jeans, a burgundy blouse, and the silver pendant her grandmother had given her for her 13th birthday. She wanted to look put together, mature, not like a child meeting her father for the first time, but like a young woman who had managed just fine without him. Thank you very much. When she emerged from the bathroom, she found her mother sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Amara looked up, and Zora was struck by the vulnerability in her expression, so different from the confident professional who had commanded the conference ballroom yesterday. "You look beautiful," Amara said softly. "Thanks." Zora sat beside her mother. "Are you okay? You seem more nervous than I am." Amara gave a small laugh. "Am I that transparent? I want to make sure you're really ready for this, Zora. You don't have to meet him if you're not comfortable. We can cancel, go back home, pretend none of this happened." Zora considered this for a moment. The thought was tempting, to return to their comfortable life, to the certainty of their two-person family unit. But she knew the questions that had always lingered in the back of her mind would only grow louder now. "I need to do this, Mom," she said finally. "I've always wondered about him, you know? Not because you weren't enough. You've always been more than enough. But just to understand that part of myself, where I come from." Amara nodded, blinking rapidly. "I understand. And I support whatever you want to do here, Zora. Whatever you need from this meeting, whatever relationship you do or don't want with Marcus, it's entirely your decision." "Even if I decided I wanted to get to know him?" Zora asked carefully, watching her mother's reaction. "Would that hurt you?" "Oh, sweetheart." Amara pulled her into a hug. "Nothing could change what we have. You wanting to know your biological father doesn't diminish our relationship. It doesn't mean I've failed you or that you're rejecting me. It just means you're a complete person with natural curiosity about your origins." Zora hugged her mother tightly, relief washing over her. "Thanks, Mom, for everything, for always being honest with me, for never making him out to be a villain, even though—" She trailed off, not wanting to voice the thought that had been circling in her mind since yesterday, that any man who could walk away from her mother, from the possibility of her, didn't deserve forgiveness. "Marcus made a choice that hurt us both," Amara said, pulling back to look at her daughter. "But people can change, Zora. I'm not saying he has, or that you should forgive him. I'm just saying, go into this meeting with an open mind. Ask your questions. See who he is now, not just who he was 15 years ago." "I will," Zora promised. "But I'm not making any promises beyond just talking to him today." "That's more than fair," Amara assured her. "Now, let's get some breakfast. Whatever happens with Marcus Fletcher, you still need to eat." The hotel cafe was busy with morning traffic. Conference attendees grabbing coffee before sessions, tourists planning their day's adventures, business travelers checking emails over breakfast. Zora and Amara found a quiet table in the corner, where they could see the entrance but were partially shielded by a large potted plant. "Do you want me to stay until he arrives?" Amara asked as they sipped their drinks. Coffee for her, hot chocolate for Zora, despite her attempts to develop a taste for coffee like her mother. Zora considered the question. Part of her wanted her mother's reassuring presence, but another part, the independent young woman she was becoming, wanted to handle this on her own. "I think I should do this myself," she said finally. "But maybe stay within sight, just in case?" "I'll be right over there," Amara promised, pointing to the hotel lobby where comfortable seating areas were arranged around a fireplace. "Close enough if you need me, but not hovering." "Perfect." Zora checked her phone. 8:53. 7 minutes until the man who had contributed to her existence was scheduled to appear. Amara squeezed her hand. "Remember, sweetheart, you're in control here. You can ask whatever you want, and you can end the conversation whenever you're ready." "I know, Mom. I'll be okay." Amara hesitated, then rose from the table. "I'm so proud of you, Zora, for your maturity, your compassion, your willingness to face difficult situations head-on. No matter what happens today, that doesn't change." As her mother walked to the lobby area, Zora took a deep breath, mentally reviewing the questions she had prepared last night. There was so much she wanted to know, from practical matters like his family's medical history to the more painful questions about why he had chosen to reject her and her mother. At precisely 8:59, Marcus Fletcher entered the cafe. He was dressed more casually than at the reception, dark jeans similar to her own and a light blue button-down shirt rather than a business suit. He paused at the entrance, scanning the room until his gaze found her. Recognition and something more complex flickered across his features before he approached her table. "Zora," he said, his voice slightly unsteady. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Please, sit down." He did so, his movements careful, as if he were approaching a wild animal that might bolt at any sudden gesture. A server appeared, and Marcus ordered black coffee, his eyes never leaving Zora's face. "You look so much like your mother," he said when the server departed. "But I can see myself in you too. The Fletcher jawline, my mother's height." "I know," Zora replied, finding her voice steadier than she had expected. "I've been told I have her eyes but your analytical expression. At least, that's what my Uncle James says." "Your Uncle James?" "My mom's brother. He and Uncle Dion have been the male role models in my life," Zora said, watching his reaction carefully. "Along with my grandfather before he passed away." A flicker of pain crossed Marcus's face, but he nodded. "I'm glad you've had that support." An awkward silence fell between them. Zora took a sip of her hot chocolate, buying time as she gathered her thoughts. "I have questions," she said finally. "A lot of them. And I want honest answers, not whatever you think I want to hear." "I understand," Marcus replied solemnly. "I promise to be completely honest with you, Zora, no matter how difficult the questions or how unflattering the answers might be to me." The server returned with Marcus's coffee, creating another brief pause in the conversation. When they were alone again, Zora decided to start with the most straightforward questions. "Medical history," she said. "Any conditions or diseases that run in your family that I should know about?" If Marcus was surprised by the practical nature of her first question, he didn't show it. "My father has high blood pressure and had a mild heart attack at 65, but he's 72 now and doing well with medication. My mother had breast cancer at 52 but has been in remission for 15 years. No other significant conditions that I'm aware of." Zora nodded, mentally filing away this information. "Are your parents still alive? Do they know about me?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, they're both still alive. And no, they don't know about you. I never told anyone about your mother's pregnancy." "Why not?" Zora asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "Were you ashamed?" "Not ashamed, no," Marcus said quickly. "Afraid, perhaps. My parents are traditional. They would have expected me to marry your mother immediately, regardless of whether that was what either of us wanted. And at the time I was so focused on my career, on proving myself at the firm." He trailed off, seeming to realize that his explanation sounded hollow. "So you just pretended we didn't exist," Zora concluded. Marcus looked down at his coffee cup. "Yes," he admitted, "that's exactly what I did. It was cowardly and selfish." His honesty surprised her. She had expected excuses, justifications, attempts to paint his actions in a more favorable light. His straightforward acknowledgement of his failings caught her off guard. "Do you have other children?" she asked. "Am I a big sister? Little sister?" "No," Marcus said, looking back up at her. "No other children. I've never married. There have been relationships, but nothing lasting." Zora filed this away too. No half-siblings, no stepmother to consider. Just Marcus and his parents, grandparents she had never known. "Why now?" she asked, coming to one of her most pressing questions. "Why are you suddenly interested in meeting me after 15 years of silence?" Marcus took a deep breath. The honest answer is that I've been questioning my life choices for some time now. I've achieved everything I thought I wanted professionally, but found it empty, meaningless. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I had actually been thinking about trying to find you and your mother to at least acknowledge my mistake. But running into you at the reception was pure coincidence. Seeing you, recognizing myself in you, was like a physical shock. So what do you want from me now? Zora asked bluntly. A relationship? Visitation? What? I want whatever you're willing to give, Marcus replied. I have no right to demand anything from you, Zora. I forfeited that right 15 years ago. If all you want is this one conversation for closure, I'll respect that. If you're open to more, to getting to know each other over time, I would be grateful for the opportunity. But this is entirely your decision. Zora studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. There was an intensity in his expression, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with the successful investment banker image. I'm angry with you, she said finally, surprising herself with the admission. I've never let myself feel that before. Mom never encouraged me to be angry about not having a father. She always focused on how complete our family was, just the two of us. But sitting here, looking at you, I'm angry. You missed everything. My first steps, my first words, my first day of school, all my birthdays, and not because you couldn't be there, but because you chose not to be. Marcus didn't flinch from her words. You have every right to be angry, he said quietly. I deserve that anger. I missed everything, and those are moments I can never get back, that you can never get back. Having a father present for those milestones. Why should I give you a chance now? Zora demanded, tears threatening despite her determination to remain composed. Why should I let you into my life when you didn't want me in yours? You shouldn't, Marcus said simply. Not for my sake, at least. The only reason to consider allowing me into your life would be if you think it might benefit you in some way, if knowing me, understanding that part of your heritage, would add something valuable to your life. His answer wasn't what she expected, and Zora found herself momentarily speechless. She had anticipated him to plead his case, to try to convince her to give him a chance. His acceptance of her potential rejection was disconcerting. I need to think about this, she said finally. This is a lot to process. Of course, Marcus agreed immediately. Take all the time you need. I'm in New York until Wednesday if you decide you want to talk again before you leave. And after that, I'm just a phone call away. No pressure, no expectations. Zora nodded, finishing the last of her hot chocolate. I should go. My mom and I have plans for the day. Broadway shows, right? Marcus said, then quickly added, Your mother mentioned it yesterday, that you were here for your birthday weekend. Yes, Zora confirmed, standing up. Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you for asking them, Marcus replied, rising as well. And Zora, happy birthday again. 15 looks good on you. A small, unexpected smile tugged at her lips. Thanks. As she walked away from the table, toward where her mother waited in the lobby, Zora felt oddly lighter. The meeting hadn't resolved anything. Her feelings about Marcus were still a complicated tangle of curiosity, resentment, and tentative interest. But having faced him, having asked her questions and received honest answers, had given her something she hadn't realized she needed: agency in the situation. For 15 years, her father's absence had been a fact of her life, something that had happened to her before she was even born. Now, for the first time, the choice was hers. Whether to allow him into her life, in what capacity, and on what terms, these decisions belonged to her. As she reached her mother, Amara stood up, concern evident in her expression. How did it go? Zora considered the question. It was informative, she said finally. He was honest, I think. Didn't make excuses. That's something, Amara acknowledged. Are you okay? I'm not sure yet, Zora admitted. Can we just enjoy our day? See the shows? Have lunch at that place you found? I need to think about all this." "Of course," Amara said, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Today is about celebrating you, nothing else. Broadway and cheesecake, as promised." As they walked out of the hotel into the bright New York morning, Zora glanced back once. Through the cafe window, she could see Marcus still seated at their table, staring into his coffee cup with an expression she couldn't quite read. 15 years too late, her father had entered her life. The question now was whether she would allow him to stay. The remainder of the weekend passed in a whirlwind of Broadway shows, museum visits, and New York adventures. True to her word, Amara kept the focus on celebrating Zora's birthday, allowing her daughter the space to process the unexpected meeting with Marcus at her own pace. For his part, Marcus maintained his distance, sending only a brief text message to Amara on Sunday evening. "Thank you for allowing me to meet Zora. The decision about any future contact is entirely hers. I'll respect whatever she chooses." Amara showed the message to Zora, who read it silently before handing the phone back without comment. Her thoughtful expression told Amara that her daughter was still working through her complicated feelings about the situation. By Monday morning, it was time to return home. As they packed their bags and prepared to check out of the hotel, Zora finally broke her silence on the subject. "I think I want to talk to him again," she said, carefully folding a sweater into her suitcase. "Not right away, but eventually. Is that okay?" Amara paused in her own packing, giving her daughter her full attention. "Of course it's okay, sweetheart. This is your decision. I told you I'd support whatever you choose." "But how do you feel about it?" Zora pressed. "Really, Mom, I want to know." Amara sat on the edge of the bed, considering her response carefully. "Honestly, it's complicated. Part of me is wary. Marcus hurt us both, and I don't want to see you disappointed if he can't be the father you might hope for." She took a deep breath. "But another part of me believes in second chances, in the possibility that people can grow and change. And most importantly, I believe in your judgment, Zora. You're thoughtful and insightful, and you'll protect your heart while still being open to possibilities. That's who you are." Zora nodded slowly. "I'm not rushing into anything. I want to know more. About him, about that side of my family. It feels like there's this whole part of me that's been a mystery." "I understand," Amara said softly, "and I want you to have answers to those questions." "You're still my mom," Zora said firmly, looking directly into Amara's eyes. "Nothing changes that. Ever." Amara felt tears welling up. "I know, baby. Nothing could ever change what we have." They finished packing in companionable silence, the weight of the decision acknowledged but not overwhelming. Before they left the room, Zora sent a text to the number Marcus had provided. "This is Zora. I'm not ready for regular contact yet, but I'd like to email occasionally, if that's okay with you." His response came almost immediately. "I'd be honored. Thank you for giving me this chance." Zora showed the exchange to her mother, who nodded approvingly. "Email is good. It gives you control over the pace and content of the communication." "That's what I thought," Zora agreed. "Plus, I can think about what I want to say instead of being put on the spot." As they headed to the airport, returning to their regular lives, both mother and daughter knew that a significant shift had occurred. Not an earthquake that destroyed their foundation, but a recalibration that acknowledged new possibilities while honoring the strength of what they had built together. Back in his office on Tuesday morning, Marcus struggled to focus on the investment portfolios before him. Numbers and projections that had once commanded his complete attention now seemed trivial compared to the monumental changes occurring in his personal life. His daughter, had agreed to email correspondence. It wasn't full forgiveness or acceptance, but it was an opening, a chance he had never expected to receive. "Mr. Fletcher?" His executive assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your 10 o'clock is here. Send them in." Marcus replied automatically, closing the file he had been attempting to review. The meeting was a blur, something about risk assessments and market projections. Marcus went through the motions, offering analysis and recommendations with professional competence, while his mind continued to circle back to Zora, her intelligent eyes, so like Amara's but with an analytical quality that reminded him of his own mother, the way she had confronted him directly, asking hard questions without flinching, her composure, her eloquence, her determination. "Are we boring you, Marcus?" The question came from Harold Warrington, Elaine's brother-in-law and a major client of the firm. Marcus snapped back to attention. "Not at all. I was just considering the implications of the market shift you mentioned." He smoothly pivoted to a detailed analysis, pulling his focus back to the meeting with effort. When the clients finally departed, Marcus's partner, David Chen, lingered behind. "What's going on with you?" David asked bluntly. "I've never seen you so distracted during a client meeting. Are you ill?" Marcus considered deflecting the question but found himself craving honesty after the weekend's events. "I just discovered I have a 15-year-old daughter," he said simply. David's eyes widened. "Excuse me?" "It's a long story," Marcus sighed. "But the short version is that I made a terrible mistake 15 years ago, and now I'm facing the consequences and the unexpected gift of that mistake." "I had no idea," David said, visibly stunned. "You've never mentioned... all these years?" "I didn't know her," Marcus admitted. "I knew about the pregnancy, but I walked away. Told the mother I wasn't interested in being a father." The words sounded even more callous when spoken aloud in his pristine office, surrounded by the symbols of the success he had prioritized over human connection. "Wow," David said after a moment. "That's not what I expected to hear from you." "It's not something I'm proud of," Marcus replied. "But I met her this weekend. My daughter. She's extraordinary, David. Brilliant, poised, confident. Everything a father could hope for in a child. And I had nothing to do with any of it." David studied his partner's face. "You look different," he observed. "I can't quite put my finger on it, but something's changed." "Everything's changed," Marcus confirmed. "I just don't know exactly what that means yet." After David left, Marcus turned to his computer and began typing an email to Vanessa, ending their relationship as gently but firmly as possible. It wasn't fair to keep her in limbo while he reconfigured his entire understanding of his life and priorities. That task completed, he opened a new email and began a much more difficult message, one to his parents. For 15 years, he had kept Amara's pregnancy a secret from them, partly from fear of their judgment and partly from his own desire to pretend the situation didn't exist. Now, with Zora's permission to email her, he felt an overwhelming need to be honest with everyone in his life. Finding the right words proved challenging. How to explain not only that they had a granddaughter they had never known, but also that he had deliberately kept this information from them for a decade and a half. He was still struggling with the draft when his phone rang, Amara's number appearing on the screen. "Hello?" he answered, heart rate accelerating. "Marcus, it's Amara," she said, her voice formal but not cold. "Do you have a minute to talk?" "Of course," he replied, saving the draft email and pushing it aside. "Is everything okay? Is Zora all right?" "She's fine," Amara assured him. "We're back home now. I'm calling because, well, Zora told me she's agreed to email correspondence with you." "Yes," Marcus confirmed. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." "I want to be clear about something," Amara continued, her tone measured. "Zora is curious about you, about her paternal heritage. That's natural and healthy. But she's also vulnerable in ways she might not recognize herself." "I understand," Marcus said solemnly. "I promise you, Amara, I have no intention of disappointing her again. I know I have to earn any place in her life." "It's not just about disappointment," Amara clarified. "It's about expectations. Zora has grown up with a certain idea of what family means, what relationships should look like. If you're going to be in her life, even peripherally through email, you need to understand that your actions will shape her perceptions of herself and her worth. The gravity of this responsibility settled over Marcus like a physical weight. I hadn't thought of it quite that way, he admitted. But you're right, of course. I'm not trying to scare you off, Amara said, her voice softening slightly. I just want you to recognize what's at stake. This isn't about alleviating your guilt or satisfying your curiosity. This is about Zora and what's best for her. I know, Marcus said quietly, and I appreciate your directness. I'm trying to approach this with the seriousness it deserves, I promise you. There was a pause before Amara spoke again. There's something else we need to discuss. Practical matters. Of course, Marcus said. Whatever you need. I don't need anything, Amara corrected him firmly. Zora and I have managed perfectly well on our own for 15 years. But if you're going to be in Zora's life in any capacity, we should discuss things like college funds, inheritance considerations, that sort of thing. Marcus felt a flash of hope, not because he wanted to provide financially, but because Amara's willingness to discuss long-term considerations suggested she wasn't entirely opposed to his ongoing presence in their lives. I'd like to set up a trust for Zora, he said immediately, for education and beyond, something substantial that would be hers regardless of how our relationship develops. I'm not looking for your money, Marcus, Amara said firmly. I know that, he replied. You've made that abundantly clear, and I respect it enormously. This isn't about paying you off or buying my way into Zora's life. It's about providing for her future, something I should have been doing all along. Amara was silent for a moment. We can discuss it, she said finally, but any financial arrangements would have to be structured in a way that doesn't create obligations or expectations. I completely agree, Marcus assured her. No strings attached, no conditions. All right, Amara said, sounding slightly less guarded. We can talk more about this later. For now, I wanted to make sure we were on the same page regarding Zora. We are, Marcus confirmed. Her well-being comes first. Always. After the call ended, Marcus sat motionless at his desk, processing the conversation. For 15 years he had avoided responsibility, chosen the path of least resistance. Now he was volunteering for the most significant responsibility imaginable, not just financial support for his daughter, but emotional investment, consideration of how his actions would shape her understanding of herself and relationships. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had rejected fatherhood when it would have meant shared joy, watching Zora grow from infant to toddler to the remarkable young woman she had become. Now he was seeking a paternal role that would involve navigating complex emotions, addressing past hurts, building trust that should have been foundational. And yet, despite the challenges ahead, Marcus felt more purposeful than he had in years. The hollow achievement of career success that had left him empty was now complemented by something with genuine meaning. The possibility of knowing his daughter, of perhaps someday earning a place in her life. He returned to the draft email to his parents, finding the words coming more easily now. He would tell them the truth, all of it, including his own failures and regrets. And he would introduce them to the concept of a granddaughter they had never known, a young woman who might someday be willing to meet them. As he typed, Marcus felt the weight of 15 years of secrets and avoidance lifting. Whatever happened next, whether Zora ultimately welcomed him into her life or decided after their email exchanges that she wanted no further contact, he was finally facing the truth of his choices and their consequences. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Fletcher was choosing the harder path not because it offered professional advancement or financial reward, but because it was right. Because somewhere in the midst of his carefully constructed success, he had lost sight of what truly mattered. And now, through an unexpected second chance, he had the opportunity to recalibrate his understanding of what made a life worthwhile. His first email to Zora took hours to compose. He wrote and deleted and rewrote, wanting to strike the perfect balance, honest but not overwhelming, interested but not intrusive, open about his past mistakes but not seeking premature forgiveness. Finally, as evening shadows lengthened across his office, he settled on a message that felt right. Dear Zora, thank you for allowing me this communication. I recognize what a gift it is, one I haven't earned and don't take lightly. I thought I might start by telling you a bit about the Fletcher side of your family history, if you're interested. My parents, your grandparents, are Raymond and Catherine Fletcher. Raymond grew up in Connecticut, the son of a high school principal and a nurse. Catherine was raised in Virginia, where her family owned a small publishing company. Perhaps that's where your interest in writing comes from? I've drafted an email telling them about you. I won't send it without your permission, but I wanted you to know that I'm no longer hiding the truth from anyone in my life. If there's anything specific you'd like to know about me or the Fletcher family, please just ask. No question is off limits. I look forward to hearing from you, whenever and if ever you feel comfortable responding. Respectfully, Marcus. He read it over once more, then clicked send before he could overthink it further. The ball was now in Zora's court, as it should be. All he could do was wait, hope, and commit to being worthy of whatever opportunity she might grant him. Marcus shut down his computer and prepared to leave the office. For the first time in years, he wasn't taking work home with him. Tonight, he would sit in his penthouse apartment and really look at the space he had created, the impersonal luxury that had seemed so important but now felt like a hollow achievement compared to the family he had rejected. Tomorrow, he would begin to make changes, not just in how he approached his potential relationship with Zora, but in how he lived his entire life. It was time to align his actions with what he now recognized as truly valuable. 15 years too late, Marcus Fletcher was finally growing up. The email correspondence between Marcus and Zora began cautiously. Her replies were polite but brief, asking factual questions about family medical history and educational backgrounds. Marcus responded with detailed information, never pushing for more personal connection than she offered. Over the weeks that followed, a gradual shift occurred. Zora's questions became more personal, about his childhood, his interests outside of work, books he had enjoyed at her age. Marcus answered each query thoughtfully, revealing parts of himself that few people in his professional life ever saw. Amara observed this developing correspondence with a mixture of caution and grudging respect for how Marcus was handling the situation. He never overstepped, never presumed a closer relationship than Zora offered, and always copied Amara on their exchanges until Zora explicitly told him this was no longer necessary. "He's being very respectful of my boundaries," Zora commented one evening as she and Amara prepared dinner together, a weekly ritual they both cherished. "I asked about his parents, and he said he still hasn't told them about me because he's waiting for my permission." "That's considerate," Amara acknowledged, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. "What do you think about them knowing?" Zora considered the question as she stirred the pasta sauce. "I'm curious about them, but I'm not sure I'm ready to be known by them yet. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Amara assured her. "There's no rush, sweetheart. Take all the time you need." 3 months after their initial meeting, Zora approached her mother with a request that Amara had been both expecting and dreading. "I want to meet him again," Zora said, sitting cross-legged on Amara's bed while her mother folded laundry. "In person, I mean. He's coming to the city for a conference next month, and he asked if I might be interested in having lunch. With you there too, if you're comfortable with it." Amara set down the shirt she was folding, giving her daughter her full attention. "How do you feel about that idea?" "Nervous," Zora admitted. "But also ready, I think. We've been emailing for months now, and I feel like I know him better. Not as a father figure, just as Marcus." She looked at her mother earnestly. "Would you come with me? At least for this first meeting?" "Of course," Amara said without hesitation. "If that's what you want." The lunch was scheduled for a Saturday at a casual restaurant not far from their home. As the day approached, Amara found herself increasingly anxious. not just for Zora, but for herself as well. She had maintained a cordial but distant relationship with Marcus during the months of email exchanges, focusing solely on Zora's well-being rather than addressing her own complicated feelings about his return to their lives. The morning of the lunch, Amara stood before her closet, uncharacteristically indecisive about what to wear. Everything seemed either too formal or too casual, too defensive or too approachable. "Mom, have you seen my blue cardigan?" Zora called, coming into the room and pausing when she saw her mother still in her robe. "You're not dressed yet? We need to leave in 45 minutes. I know, Amara sighed. "I'm just having a moment of… I don't know what to call it." Zora studied her mother with perceptive eyes. "You're nervous about seeing him too." It wasn't a question, and Amara didn't bother denying it. "It's complicated, Zora. I've spent 15 years defining myself in opposition to his rejection, building a life that proved we didn't need him. And now he's back, and it challenges that narrative," Zora finished for her. "I get it, Mom, but you did build that life. You did prove we didn't need him. Nothing about his presence now changes what you accomplished." Amara looked at her daughter in wonder. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher," Zora replied with a small smile. "Wear the burgundy blouse with your black pants. You always look confident in that outfit." 45 minutes later, they arrived at the restaurant. Marcus was already there, seated at a table by the window. He stood as they approached, his expression a mixture of nervousness and genuine pleasure. "Zora, Amara, thank you for coming," he said, waiting for them to be seated before resuming his own seat. "It's wonderful to see you both." The initial conversation was awkward. Polite inquiries about the drive to the restaurant, comments about the unseasonably warm weather, safe topics that avoided the emotional complexity of their situation. But gradually, as their meals arrived and they began to eat, the conversation shifted to more substantive topics. "I've been following your literacy initiative in the news," Marcus said to Amara. "The results you're achieving in underserved schools are remarkable." "Thank you," Amara replied, slightly surprised by his genuine interest. "It's been a collaborative effort. We have dedicated teachers implementing the program who deserve most of the credit." "Mom always downplays her role," Zora interjected, "but she designed the entire curriculum framework. The teachers love it because it actually works with how kids learn, not against it." Marcus smiled at Zora's proud defense of her mother. "That doesn't surprise me at all. Your mother was always insightful about how people think and learn, even back in college." "You knew my mom in college?" Zora asked, leaning forward with interest. "She never mentioned that." A brief flash of discomfort crossed Amara's face. "We had a few classes together," she said, "but we didn't start dating until after graduation. I noticed her immediately in our educational psychology seminar," Marcus continued, seemingly unaware of Amara's reluctance to discuss their past. "She asked the most challenging questions, always pushing the professors to justify their theories with real-world applications." Zora looked between them, clearly fascinated by this glimpse into their shared history. "So you were friends first?" "Study partners," Amara clarified. "We were both serious students." "Your mother was brilliant," Marcus said, his expression softening with the memory. "I was intimidated by her, if I'm being honest. All these years later, I'm not surprised by her success. She always had a clear vision of how education could be transformative." Amara felt unexpectedly affected by his words. After 15 years of thinking of Marcus primarily as the man who had rejected them, it was disorienting to hear him speak with genuine admiration about her academic abilities. "What about you, Zora?" Marcus asked, smoothly changing the subject. "Your mother mentioned you're interested in writing. Any particular genre or style you're drawn to?" Zora's face lit up at the question. "I love magical realism. Stories where extraordinary elements exist in an otherwise realistic setting. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Isabel Allende, Toni Morrison. I'm working on a novella now that explores the boundary between perception and reality through the eyes of a girl who can see people's past lives. That sounds fascinating, Marcus said, his interest clearly genuine. Have you always been drawn to that blending of reality and fantasy? For as long as I can remember, Zora confirmed. Mom used to read me fairy tales, but I always wanted to reimagine them in modern settings. I wrote my first story when I was 6, a version of Cinderella where she was a scientist whose stepmother kept destroying her experiments. She illustrated it too, Amara added, smiling at the memory. Drew Cinderella in a lab coat with test tubes and microscopes. I'd love to read your work sometime, Marcus said carefully, looking at Zora. Only if you're comfortable sharing it, of course. A moment of hesitation crossed Zora's face before she nodded. I could send you a short story I wrote for my creative writing class. My teacher said it was good enough to submit to young adult literary magazines. I'd be honored, Marcus replied, his expression conveying his understanding of the trust implied in her offer. The conversation continued to flow more naturally as the meal progressed. Zora asked Marcus about his own interests outside of work, seeming surprised to learn that he played classical piano and had recently started volunteering with a financial literacy program for high school students. That's actually how I discovered your school's business leadership program, he explained. I was researching successful models to implement elsewhere. Why financial literacy? Amara asked, curious despite herself. Marcus considered the question seriously. I've seen how lack of financial knowledge perpetuates inequality. People make poor decisions not because they're incapable of understanding money management, but because no one has ever taught them the fundamentals. He paused. And on a more personal level, I suppose I'm trying to use my expertise for something more meaningful than just making wealthy people wealthier. The sincerity in his voice struck Amara. This was not the ambitious, career-focused Marcus she had known 15 years ago, whose values had been entirely aligned with professional advancement and financial success. As the lunch came to an end, Marcus asked if they might consider making these meetings a regular occurrence. Perhaps monthly, if Zora was comfortable with the idea. I'd like that, Zora said, looking to her mother for confirmation. If that's what you want, sweetheart, Amara replied. I can join you or not, whatever makes you comfortable. Maybe both? Zora suggested. Sometimes with you, sometimes just Marcus and me? If that's okay? Amara nodded, recognizing the importance of giving Zora space to develop her own relationship with Marcus while still providing support. That sounds reasonable. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Marcus hesitated before speaking again. There's something else I wanted to discuss with both of you. I've been thinking about making a significant career change. What kind of change? Amara asked, surprised by this unexpected topic. I'm considering leaving Fletcher Investment Group, Marcus explained. I've been approached about heading a new foundation focused on educational equity and financial literacy in underserved communities. The salary would be substantially less than what I make now, but the work would be meaningful, something I could be proud of. Amara and Zora exchanged glances, both clearly surprised by this revelation. That sounds like a major shift, Amara commented neutrally. What prompted this? Marcus met her gaze directly. Many things, but meeting Zora, seeing the incredible person she's become despite my absence, recognizing the meaningful work you've dedicated yourself to, it's made me reevaluate what success really means. A charged silence followed his words. Amara found herself unexpectedly moved by his candor and the evident sincerity of his self-reflection. I think that sounds awesome, Zora said finally. Using your financial skills to help people instead of just making money. I haven't made a final decision yet, Marcus clarified. But I wanted to share this with you both. I'm trying to align my life more closely with what I now understand to be truly valuable. As they parted ways outside the restaurant, Zora surprised both adults by giving Marcus a quick, somewhat awkward hug. Thank you for lunch, she said. I'll email you that story. "Thank you, Zora," Marcus replied, clearly touched by the gesture. "I look forward to reading it." He turned to Amara. "Thank you for coming today, for making this possible." Amara nodded, still processing the unexpected developments of the lunch. "Zora's happiness is what matters to me. Always has been." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "It's what should have mattered to me too. I'm trying to make up for lost time, though I know that's not really possible." "No, it's not," Amara agreed. "But going forward is still worthwhile." As she and Zora walked to their car, Amara was struck by the strange turn their lives had taken. 3 months ago, Marcus Fletcher had been an absence, a rejection, a wound long scarred over but never fully healed. Now he was becoming a presence in their lives, not as the father and partner he had refused to be 15 years ago, but as something new, something still being defined. "What did you think?" Zora asked as they drove home. "About lunch? About him?" Amara considered her answer carefully. "I think he's genuinely trying to be thoughtful about his role in your life. I think he respects your boundaries and seems sincerely interested in knowing you as a person." "But what about you?" Zora pressed. "How do you feel about him being back in our lives?" Amara sighed. "It's complicated, Zora. There's a lot of history there, but I can see that he's changed from the man I knew 15 years ago. He seems more reflective, less self-centered." "Do you think you could ever forgive him?" Zora asked quietly. "Not for my sake, but for yours." The question caught Amara off guard. For 15 years, she had channeled her hurt into determination, her anger into independence. The possibility of forgiveness had never seemed relevant. Marcus was gone, and she had built a life without him. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I haven't really thought about forgiveness. It wasn't necessary when he wasn't part of our lives." "But now he is," Zora pointed out. "Or at least, he's becoming part of my life. And that means you'll have to interact with him sometimes." Amara nodded, acknowledging the truth in her daughter's words. "You're right. I guess I have some thinking to do." That night, after Zora had gone to bed, Amara sat on her back porch with a cup of tea, reflecting on the day's events. The Marcus she had seen today was significantly different from the ambitious young man who had rejected fatherhood in favor of career advancement. He seemed genuinely changed by regret, by the recognition of what he had lost through his choices. For the first time, Amara allowed herself to truly consider the concept of forgiveness, not for Marcus's sake, but for her own. The anger and resentment she had carried, while justified, had become part of her identity. What would it mean to let that go? To acknowledge that the man who had hurt them so deeply might be capable of growth and change. As the night deepened around her, Amara realized that the neat narrative she had constructed, of the strong, single mother who needed no one, who had triumphed over abandonment, was just one version of her story. Perhaps there was room for a more complex narrative, one that allowed for change, for evolution, for the messy reality of human relationships. It wouldn't happen overnight. Trust, once broken, could not be quickly restored. But sitting alone under the stars, Amara found herself open to possibilities she had never before considered. The future stretched before them, unwritten and full of potential. 2 years later, on a perfect June afternoon, chairs were arranged in neat rows across the lush green lawn of Westridge Academy. Proud families gathered beneath a cloudless sky, programs fluttering in their hands like butterflies as they searched for their seats. The graduation ceremony was set to begin in 30 minutes, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation and joy. Amara arrived early, as was her habit for important occasions. Her mother, Yvonne, walked beside her, elegant in a floral dress and matching hat. Behind them came Amara's brothers, James and Dion, accompanied by their wives and children, a small but exuberant contingent of supporters for Zora's high school graduation. "Over there," Yvonne pointed toward a section in the 4th row where reserved signs marked their seats. Looks like we have prime viewing positions." As they settled in, arranging gift bags and cameras, Amara scanned the gathering crowd. She wasn't looking for anyone in particular, she told herself, just taking in the celebratory scene. But her gaze stilled when she spotted a familiar figure making his way down the aisle, accompanied by an older couple. Marcus caught her eye and offered a tentative wave. Beside him, Raymond and Catherine Fletcher walked with the careful dignity of people in their 70s, both appearing slightly overwhelmed by the bustling crowd, but determined to be present for this milestone. The past 2 years had brought changes none of them could have anticipated that day in the New York Hotel Café. Marcus had indeed left his position at Fletcher Investment Group to head the Educational Opportunity Foundation, a career shift that had raised eyebrows in financial circles but had given him obvious satisfaction. His monthly lunches with Zora had gradually evolved into a genuine relationship, not the traditional father-daughter bond that might have developed had he been present from the beginning, but something unique and valuable in its own right. 6 months after their reconnection, Zora had expressed interest in meeting her paternal grandparents. The initial meeting had been awkward, laden with the weight of 15 years of absence and secrets. But Catherine Fletcher, upon seeing her granddaughter, had burst into tears and embraced Zora with such genuine emotion that the tension had immediately dissipated. Raymond had been more reserved, but his evident pride in Zora's accomplishments had won her over. Now, as Marcus and his parents approached, Amara rose to greet them with a polite smile. Time and perspective had softened the edges of her resentment, though a complete thawing remained a work in progress. "Amara," Marcus said warmly, "you look lovely. Is Zora nervous about her speech?" As valedictorian, Zora would be addressing her graduating class, an honor that had surprised no one who knew her. "Surprisingly calm," Amara replied. "She's been practicing for weeks, but this morning she seemed more excited than anxious." Catherine stepped forward, clasping Amara's hands in her own. "Thank you for saving seats for us. We wouldn't have missed this for the world." "Zora wanted all her family here," Amara said simply, the words acknowledging what had gradually become their reality, an unconventional, sometimes awkward, but ultimately supportive extended family unit. As they took their seats, Amara found herself seated between her mother and Marcus. 2 years ago, this proximity would have been uncomfortable, laden with unresolved tension. Now it felt, if not entirely natural, at least not actively distressing. "Nervous?" Marcus asked quietly, noticing how Amara's program was slightly crumpled in her grip. "A little," she admitted. "It's a big moment. The end of one chapter, the beginning of another." "She's ready," Marcus assured her. "Columbia will be lucky to have her." Zora's acceptance to Columbia University's creative writing program had been cause for celebration throughout their extended family. Marcus had offered to pay her full tuition, an offer Amara had initially resisted out of long-standing pride and independence. But Zora, with her practical wisdom, had pointed out that accepting his financial support for college would allow her to graduate debt-free and pursue her writing career without immediate financial pressure. "She's worked so hard for this," Amara said, her voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes I can't believe we're here already, 17 years gone in the blink of an eye." "You've done an amazing job raising her," Marcus said, his voice equally emotional. "I know I've said it before, but it bears repeating. You created something beautiful, Amara, even when, especially when, I failed you both." Before Amara could respond, the ceremony began. The graduates processed into the traditional pomp and circumstance, their blue gowns bright against the green lawn, their expressions ranging from solemn to giddy. Zora walked near the front, her posture straight, her decorated cap adorned with literary quotes and miniature books, a nod to her passion. As she passed their section, she broke protocol to offer a small wave, her smile illuminating her face. Amara felt tears threatening and blinked them back, determined to remain composed at least until Zora's speech. The principal's opening remarks and various presentations seemed to pass in a blur. Then Zora was being introduced, moving confidently to the podium, adjusting the microphone with practiced ease. Distinguished faculty, honored guests, family, friends, and my fellow graduates, she began, her voice clear and steady. We stand here today at a threshold, looking back at the path that brought us here and forward to the many paths that lie ahead. As Zora continued her speech, weaving literary references with personal reflections and gentle humor, Amara felt a complex mixture of emotions, fierce pride, bittersweet nostalgia, and profound gratitude for the journey they had shared. Our stories are not written in isolation, Zora was saying, her gaze sweeping across the audience. They are shaped by those who walk alongside us, those who have been there from the beginning, those who joined our narratives along the way, and even those whose absence created spaces we had to navigate. Amara felt Marcus shift slightly beside her, recognizing the subtle reference to his own place in Zora's story. I've been fortunate, Zora continued, to have extraordinary people influencing my narrative. My mother, who showed me that determination and love can overcome any obstacle. Her eyes found Amara in the crowd, and Amara felt a tear escape despite her best efforts. My grandmother and uncles who expanded the definition of family through their unwavering support. Yvonne squeezed Amara's hand, while James and Dion beamed from their seats. My teachers and mentors, who challenged me to think beyond the boundaries of what seemed possible. My friends, who shared the daily chapters of adolescence with all its plot twists and character development. Zora paused, her gaze shifting slightly. And those who entered my story later, proving that narratives can be revised, that new characters can arrive even in later chapters and enrich the tale in unexpected ways. Marcus sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on his daughter, the daughter he had nearly missed knowing entirely. As we write the next chapters of our lives, Zora concluded, let us remember that the most compelling stories are not those of perfect characters making flawless choices, but of real, complicated humans who stumble, learn, grow, and ultimately find their way toward greater understanding of themselves and of each other. The applause was thunderous as Zora returned to her seat, her shoulders relaxing slightly now that her speech was complete. Amara wiped away tears, aware that Marcus was doing the same beside her. She's remarkable, he whispered, voice rough with emotion. Yes, Amara agreed simply. She is. The remainder of the ceremony proceeded according to tradition. The presentation of diplomas, the turning of tassels, the triumphant tossing of caps into the air. And then it was over, the formal portion at least, with graduates streaming across the lawn to find their families amid hugs, photos, and congratulations. Zora found them quickly, moving through the crowd with purpose, her diploma clutched in one hand. She was immediately enveloped in Yvonne's embrace, then passed from family member to family member for hugs and congratulations. When she reached Marcus, there was a brief moment of hesitation. 2 years had brought them closer, but the relationship was still evolving, still finding its shape. Then Zora stepped forward and hugged him tightly. "Thank you for coming," she said, "for being here." "I wouldn't have missed it for anything," Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Your speech was perfect, Zora. Absolutely perfect." She turned to her grandparents next, accepting Catherine's enthusiastic embrace and Raymond's more reserved but equally sincere congratulations. Finally, Zora stood before Amara. For a moment, mother and daughter simply looked at each other, 17 years of shared history flowing between them, the struggles and triumphs, the late nights and early mornings, the tears and laughter that had formed the foundation of their extraordinary bond. "Mom," Zora said, and somehow that single word contained multitudes. Amara pulled her daughter close, holding her as if she could somehow preserve this moment, this feeling for eternity. "I am so proud of you," she whispered. "So incredibly proud." Later, as planned, they all gathered at Amara's house for a celebration. The backyard had been transformed with lights, flowers, and tables laden with Zora's favorite foods. Friends and extended family mingled in the warm evening air, sharing stories and congratulations. Amara found herself in the kitchen preparing another tray of appetizers when Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Need any help?" he offered. 2 years ago, the idea of Marcus in her kitchen would have been unthinkable. Now, it was not quite normal, but no longer jarring. "Sure," she said, gesturing to a stack of plates. "Those need to go out to the dessert table." They worked in companionable silence for a moment before Marcus spoke again. "I never properly thanked you, Amara." She looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For allowing me back into Zora's life, for giving me a chance I didn't deserve, for raising our daughter to be the incredible person she is, despite my absence." Amara considered his words carefully. "I didn't do it for you," she said finally. "I did it for Zora, because she deserved the opportunity to know both sides of her heritage, to make her own decisions about who belonged in her life." "I know," Marcus acknowledged, "but still, thank you." Amara nodded, accepting his gratitude without further comment. Their relationship had evolved over the past 2 years into something like a respectful partnership, focused on Zora's well-being, defined by clear boundaries, occasionally awkward but ultimately functional. "She's going to change the world," Marcus said, looking through the window to where Zora stood surrounded by friends, animated and radiant in the glow of achievement and possibility. "Yes," Amara agreed, a smile softening her features. "She already has, in her way. Changed our worlds, at least." Marcus met her gaze, and in that moment of shared understanding, Amara felt the last of her long-held resentment begin to dissolve. Not because Marcus deserved forgiveness for his past choices, but because holding on to that anger no longer served any purpose in the life she had built. "I should get these outside," Marcus said, lifting the stack of plates. "And I'll be right behind you with these," Amara replied, gesturing to the appetizer tray. As they moved through the house toward the backyard celebration, Amara reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. 15 years of absence, 2 years of cautious reconnection, and now this moment of tentative peace. Outside, the gathering had taken on the warm, mellow quality of celebration at its peak. Yvonne was deep in conversation with Catherine Fletcher, finding common ground in their shared experience as educators. Raymond was listening intently to James describe his latest construction project. Dayon's children were playing an elaborate game of tag around the yard's perimeter, and at the center of it all was Zora, confident, compassionate, brilliant Zora, surrounded by the constellation of people who loved her, each in their own way. As the evening deepened into night, fairy lights twinkling in the trees and conversation flowing as freely as the lemonade, Amara found herself standing slightly apart, taking in the scene with a full heart. Marcus approached, offering her a glass of punch. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. Amara accepted the drink with a small smile. "I was just thinking about paths, how rarely they go where we expect, how the detours and obstacles often lead us to places we never could have imagined." Marcus nodded, understanding the subtext of her words. "If someone had told me 17 years ago that I'd be standing in your backyard celebrating our daughter's high school graduation, you'd have run even faster in the opposite direction?" Amara suggested, a hint of wry humor in her tone. Marcus winced but acknowledged the truth with a rueful nod. "I was a fool," he said simply. "The biggest mistake of my life." "And yet," Amara mused, looking toward Zora, who was now showing her grandmother photos on her phone. "Here we are." "Here we are," Marcus echoed, following her gaze. In the warm June night, surrounded by the family they had created, conventional and unconventional, bound by blood and choice and circumstance, they stood together, connected by the remarkable young woman who had found a way to forge meaning from absence, to create wholeness from fragmentation. Zora looked up then, catching sight of her parents standing side by side. She smiled, a smile that held knowledge beyond her years, understanding of the complex, imperfect humans who had created her, and acceptance of their flaws and strengths alike. In that smile was forgiveness, was future, was possibility. In that smile was everything that mattered. And as the celebration continued around them, as Zora turned back to her conversation, as life moved inexorably forward with all its unexpected twists and turns, Amara and Marcus remained for a moment in silent acknowledgement of their shared journey, the mistakes and regrets of the past, the cautious rebuilding of the present, and the open, unwritten possibility of the future. Some stories ended, others began, and the most important ones simply continued, evolving with each new chapter, each new day, each new choice. Their story, Amara's, Marcus's, and most importantly, Zora's, was far from finished. And for the first time in 17 years, that uncertainty felt not like a threat, but like a promise. Not like an ending, but like a beginning. Not like regret, but like hope. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen,